The water was colder than I expected. That was my first coherent thought as Lake Michigan swallowed me whole, dragging me down into a darkness that felt almost peaceful compared to the chaos of the moments before. My lungs burned, begging for air, but my body refused to cooperate. My arms and legs moved in slow motion, pushing through water that felt as thick as honey. Above me, the surface shimmered like broken glass, fractured, distant, and getting farther away with every heartbeat. My father's face was the last thing I saw before the water closed over my head. Not the face of the man who taught me to ride a bike, not the man who helped me with calculus homework, but something twisted, desperate. A stranger's face wearing the mask of the father I'd trusted for 28 years. I should have seen it coming. That thought echoed in my mind as the darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. I was Claudia Marchetti, forensic accountant for one of Chicago's most prestigious financial investigation firms. I spent my days following money trails criminals thought they had hidden, unraveling schemes that took months or years to construct, finding truth buried under layers of deception. I was supposed to be good at spotting lies, but I never spotted the biggest lie of all. The one living in my childhood home, sitting across from me every Sunday night, calling me his little princess, while calculating exactly how much my death would be worth. $2 million. That was the price tag on my life. The life insurance policy my mother had taken out when I was 16. Back when she still worried about leaving me unprotected. She died 3 years ago, cancer devouring her faster than anyone expected. And my father became the sole beneficiary. $2 million. Enough to cover his gambling debts, his failed business ventures, the second mortgage he'd taken out in secret. I discovered all of it 3 days ago, buried in financial records I should never have accessed. Breadcrumbs leading to a truth I desperately wished I had never found. The numbers told a story of a man drowning in debt, a man who realized his daughter was worth more dead than alive. Confronting him had been my first mistake. Believing he'd have an explanation, my second. Getting into his car for what he called a drive to clear the air. That was the mistake that was going to cost me everything. The bridge had appeared out of nowhere. Construction barriers blocking traffic, steel rails silhouetted against the cloudy sky. He pulled over near the edge. I remember thinking it was an odd place to stop. I remember the flutter of unease in my stomach, the one I dismissed as paranoia. He was my father. He would never hurt me. The push came before I could process what was happening. One moment I was standing at the railing, staring down at the moonlit water. The next I was falling. My father's hands were still warm on my back from the force that sent me over. Now I was drowning. And all I could think about was how his expression never changed. No hesitation. No regret. No flicker of the love that was supposed to exist between parent and child. Just cold calculation, as he watched me fall into the water that would hide his crime. My chest convulsed violently, desperate for air that wasn't coming. The darkness closed in, familiar in a clinical, detached way. Tunnel vision, loss of motor control. That strange, creeping calm that comes when the body accepts what the mind refuses to believe. I was going to die in Lake Michigan because my father loved money more than he loved me. Then, impact, arms like steel bands wrapped around my waist. Suddenly I was moving. Not sinking, but rising, dragged toward a surface that felt impossibly far away. Instinct made me struggle, but my body had nothing left. I was limp, a puppet with cut strings in the grip of whoever had found me. We broke the surface together. Shouts in Italian cut through the roar in my ears. My body took over, expelling water and violent coughs that tore through my lungs. Someone held me upright, kept my head above water while I choked and gasped and remembered how to breathe. Strong arms lifted me, passing me up to reaching hands on the dock. The cold hit instantly, November wind slicing through my soaked clothes with surgical precision. I lay on the wooden planks, trembling and gasping, vision blurred, chest on fire, alive when I should have been dead. Then he appeared in my line of sight. The man who had pulled me from the water, dark hair plastered to his forehead, dress shirt clinging to a body built for violence, eyes so dark they seemed to swallow the light. Water streamed from his expensive clothing, and some distant, shocked part of me realized. He had jumped in fully dressed to save me. "Can you hear me?" he asked. His voice was deep, accented, carrying an authority that sliced through the fog in my brain. "Look at me. Focus on my voice." I tried to speak, but all that came out was another ragged cough. He turned to someone behind him, firing off rapid commands in Italian. A moment later, a jacket, cashmere, my dazed mind noted, was draped over my shaking body. "She needs a hospital," another voice said, younger, anxious. No hospital. The man who saved me didn't even hesitate. He spoke with the certainty of someone used to being obeyed. We take her to the house. Call Dr. Valentino. Tell him to meet us there. I wanted to protest, to insist on proper medical care, to demand answers, to ask who these people were and why they happened to be at this particular dock at this exact moment. But my body had other priorities. Consciousness slipped away as the adrenaline that had kept me fighting drained out of me, leaving nothing but exhaustion. The last thing I saw before the darkness claimed me was his face. Those impossibly dark eyes studying me with an intensity that should have terrified me, but instead felt like safety. I woke to warmth, to the smell of wood smoke. My body was cocooned in blankets so soft I wondered if I was dreaming. For one disoriented moment, nothing made sense. Where was I? What had happened? Why did my chest ache with every breath? Like someone had reached inside and squeezed my lungs. Then memory crashed back. The bridge. The fall. The water closing over my head like a grave. My father's hands on my back. The casual efficiency of someone discarding trash. I shot upright too fast. The room tilted, spinning around me in nauseating circles. A hand pressed gently against my shoulder, firm but steady, guiding me back down to the pillows. Slowly. The voice was familiar, that deep, commanding timbre from the dock. You swallowed half the lake. Your body needs time to recover. I blinked until the world sharpened, taking in the room around me. Crown molding original to the building, early 20th century by the look of it. Art on the walls that even my untrained eye recognized as expensive. Furniture that was both antique and comfortable. The kind of pieces purchased at auction, not in stores. Wealth. Old wealth. Effortless wealth. He sat in a chair beside the bed, still wearing the same clothes from the dock, though now dry. His dark hair pushed back from his forehead. A face striking rather than conventionally handsome. Sharp angles, cool intensity, features arranged by someone who favored intention over softness. He watched me with those impossibly dark eyes. Patient, alert, a predator waiting for the prey to make its move. Who are you? My voice was barely a croak, raw from lake water and coughing. Oscar Grasso. He said the name like it should mean something. And it did. From somewhere in the back of my mind came fragments. Newspaper headlines. Rumors whispered too quietly to be dismissed. Stories about a man who controlled half of Chicago's criminal underworld with an iron fist wrapped in silk. The Mafia boss. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Something like amusement flickered across his face. Is that what they call me? He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other with a smooth, effortless grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone who'd recently jumped off a dock to rescue a drowning stranger. I prefer businessman, he said lightly, but I suppose the newspapers need their drama. I pushed myself upright again, slower this time, and he didn't stop me. The blanket slid down to my waist, and that's when I realized, with a sharp spike of alarm, that my soaked clothes were gone. In their place was a silk pajama set that definitely wasn't mine. Oscar caught the panic instantly. My housekeeper dressed you, he said, voice even. I assure you, your modesty was thoroughly protected. It shouldn't have mattered. I had almost died tonight, thrown into freezing water by my own father. And now I was in the home of a man whose reputation came bundled with words like ruthless, dangerous, untouchable. Modesty should have been the least of my concerns. Why did you save me? I asked. The question came out thin, fragile, but it felt like the first piece of a puzzle I wasn't sure I had the strength to solve. Oscar's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. I was on my boat when I saw you fall. He paused, his jaw tightening just enough that I almost missed it. I saw someone push you. The confirmation hit harder than I expected. Some desperate, irrational part of me had hoped I imagined it. That the hands on my back were the hallucinations of a drowning brain. But Oscar had seen it. A witness to my father attempting to murder me for insurance money. Did you see his face? I whispered. The man who pushed me? No, his head shook once, deliberate. It was too dark, too far. I saw the silhouette, the motion, but not the details. He leaned forward slightly, studying me with a focus that felt surgical. You know who it was. Not a question. He'd already read the truth in me, in the way my body flinched at the memory, in the grief that hollowed my voice, in the terror I was too tired to hide. My father. The words tasted like poison. He took out a life insurance policy when I was 16. $2 million. I swallowed hard, the bitterness rising. I found out 3 days ago he's drowning in debt. Gambling losses, bad investments. I'm worth more to him dead than alive. Saying it aloud made it real. Solid, undeniable, monstrous. Dominic Marchetti, my father, had tried to kill me, and somewhere, even now, he was probably rehearsing his grief. Calculating how to stand at my funeral, what tears to shed for the cameras, how to console the insurance adjuster. Oscar was silent for a long moment. Not indifferent. Processing, weighing, analyzing with the same controlled precision he seemed to apply to everything. "And you discovered this how?" he asked at last. "I'm a forensic accountant," I said. "I follow money for a living. Find hidden assets, trace suspicious transactions, build cases that send people to prison." A humorless laugh slipped out, sharp, brittle. I traced his financials because something felt off. And I found everything. The debts. The second mortgage. The failed business deals he never told anyone about. My throat tightened. The insurance policy that makes my death extremely convenient for him. "You confronted him." "I thought he would have an explanation," I whispered. I thought there must be something I was missing. Some context that would make it make sense. The naivety burned now, humiliating in its sharpness. He's my father. I never imagined he would actually try to kill me. Oscar rose from his chair, his movements controlled, deliberate. At a sideboard near the fire, crystal decanters glowed in the warm light. He poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, then crossed the room and handed one to me. "Brandy," he said. "It will help." I took it automatically, fingers curling around the glass for warmth. Oscar settled back into his chair, every line of his body speaking a language of earned danger. A man who had learned early that the world was hostile and had become more dangerous in response. "Your father, Dominic Marchetti," he said. "He has connections to some of my competitors, minor dealings, nothing substantial. But I've heard his name." Ice slid through my veins despite the blankets cocooning me. Of course he did. Of course my father's spiral dragged him into circles even darker than I imagined. "What kind of business dealings?" My voice was hoarse. "The kind that accumulate debt when deals go wrong." Oscar's eyes hardened, the firelight catching in their darkness. "The kind that make men desperate enough to drown their own daughters." I drained the brandy in a single swallow. It burned all the way down, but the ache in my chest eased, if only for a moment. "So what happens now?" I asked. "You saved my life, but I can't go home. He thinks I'm dead. If I resurface, he'll try again." "Yes," Oscar said simply. "He will." He didn't soften it, didn't pretend. "Which is why you will stay here until we determine the best course of action." "Stay here?" I let out a strained laugh. "In the house of a man the newspapers call the most dangerous criminal in Chicago?" The irony hung sharp and bitter, running from one predator straight into the den of another. But Oscar Grasso had jumped into freezing water to save me. He had wrapped me in warmth, kept me alive, treated me with care. My father had pushed me toward death. This stranger had dragged me back to life. "I have resources," I said carefully. "I can find somewhere else to stay. A hotel. Something temporary, just until I—" Oscar's smile cut through my words, sharp as broken glass. "Your father believes you're dead. The moment you use a credit card, book a hotel room, or access your bank accounts, that illusion shatters." He leaned forward slightly, his tone low and absolute. "You need to stay dead, Miss Marchetti. At least until we decide how to handle the man who tried to kill you." "We." The single syllable hung between us. Dense with implications I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed to unravel. "You saved my life," Oscar said, setting his glass down with precise care. "In my world, that creates a debt." He paused, holding my gaze. "I intend to collect, but not until you've recovered. And we've dealt with your father appropriately." "Appropriately?" I echoed the word, my voice thin but steady. "What does that mean?" "It means," Oscar said as he rose from his chair, straightening his cuffs with the unconscious precision of a man who expected the world to fall in line for him, "that Dominic Marchetti will learn the price of attempted murder in waters I consider mine." The possessive claim should have sounded ridiculous. No one owned Lake Michigan. But sitting in Oscar Grasso's guest room, wrapped in his blankets, breathing air warmed by his fire, surrounded by a level of wealth and power most people didn't even understand enough to fear, it didn't sound like delusion. It sounded like truth. "Lake Michigan," Oscar continued, voice edged with steel. My family has controlled the lakefront for 3 generations. Every boat, every dock, every business operating near that water does so with our permission and under our protection. He looked at me then, dark eyes sharp as a blade. Your father tried to use my lake as a murder weapon. That makes his crime personal. Understanding slid through me, slow and cold. Oscar Grasso hadn't saved me purely out of kindness. Dominic Marchetti had crossed into territory Oscar considered his own, and that violation demanded a response. What do you want from me? I asked, cutting through the haze of exhaustion. Oscar's smile widened, predatory, purposeful. I want a forensic accountant with intimate knowledge of how my competitors move money and hide assets. Someone who can trace transactions my own people have failed to track. He tilted his head ever so slightly. Your father's connections give me an entry point I didn't have before. So I'm bait. You're a resource, Oscar corrected, tone smooth as silk over steel. And in exchange for your skills, applied to my interests as well as your own, I will ensure your father pays for what he did. His voice dropped, final and absolute. I will guarantee your safety until the threat he represents is eliminated, and I will give you the tools to eradicate him, so that nothing remains. The offer settled between us like smoke, dark, heavy, impossible to ignore. A devil's bargain in a room made of firelight and shadow. I should have refused. Every instinct screamed that accepting help from a man like Oscar Grasso was a catastrophic mistake. I would be trading one predator for another, one form of danger for something infinitely more complex. But my father had pushed me off a bridge. For money, he had looked me in the eyes, his daughter, his only child, and calculated that my death was worth more than my life. He would go to sleep tonight expecting me to be at the bottom of the lake. He would plan the funeral. He would practice the grief. Oscar Grasso might be dangerous, but he had pulled me from the water that should have been my grave. He was offering not just protection, but vengeance. A chance to reclaim my life by destroying the man who had tried to end it. My voice came out quiet. Steady, cold. I want to destroy him, not just hurt him, not just make him pay. I lifted my eyes to Oscar, meeting that impossible darkness without flinching. I want to take everything he has, everything he cares about, and I want him to know that I did it. That the daughter he tried to murder is the one who brought him down. Oscar studied me for a long, unnerving moment. His gaze wasn't just intense. It was evaluative, clinical, searching, as if he were measuring not only my resolve, but the shape of the person I was about to become. When he finally spoke, there was satisfaction in his voice, and something that might have been respect. Then we have an understanding, Miss Marchetti. You will work for me, using your skills under my direction, with my resources, and under my protection. And together, he stepped closer, the firelight carving shadows across his sharp features. We will ensure that your father learns exactly what it costs to betray the people who love him. He extended his hand. I took it without hesitation. His grip was firm, warm, sealing a bargain neither of us truly understood, one that would alter the course of both our lives. Welcome to the family, Oscar said. His smile was sharp as broken glass, and twice as dangerous. The office Oscar provided was a study in contrasts. An antique mahogany desk paired with 3 high-resolution monitors. Crystal whiskey decanters sitting beside a humming server rack powerful enough to run a small corporation. This was where I would build the case that would destroy my father. And the irony of doing it from a crime boss's private compound wasn't lost on me. But what Claudia Marchetti didn't know, not yet, was just how deep her father's crimes ran, or how completely she would lose herself in the pursuit of vengeance. I spent my days immersed in data, pulling every thread I'd collected on my father's financial misdeeds. Numbers, patterns, inconsistencies. The familiar rhythm of investigation that had made me one of Chicago's most thorough forensic accountants. But the stakes had never been this personal, and I had never had access to resources like these. On the 3rd day, Marco, Oscar's intelligence chief, appeared at my door. He was unremarkable in a way that felt deliberate. Average height, average build, a face designed to disappear the moment you looked away. Even after meeting him 3 times, I struggled to recall his features. A cultivated anonymity, perfect for the man who ran Oscar's intelligence network. Oscar says you need access to databases that don't officially exist, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. He slid an external hard drive toward me. This will give you access to our intelligence network, transaction records, communication intercepts, surveillance logs, everything we've collected on the organizations your father deals with. I plugged the device into my system. My breath caught. The depth of information was staggering. Bank records from institutions that claimed their firewalls were impenetrable. Email archives that should have been hidden behind encryption. Phone logs, text messages, movement reports. A map of criminal organizations that operated under the illusion of secrecy, except they weren't secret anymore. Not to us. Not to me. How do you get all of this? I asked, scrolling through transaction records that would have taken me months to obtain through legitimate channels. Marco didn't even look up. That's not something you need to know. His tone was pleasant but immovable. What you do need to know is that the information is reliable, and using it won't create trails that lead back to its source. Translation: don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. And so I didn't. In the days that followed, I mapped out the intricate web of my father's criminal connections. The picture that emerged was both better and infinitely worse than I expected. Better, because the evidence was overwhelming. Every transaction, every intercepted communication, every coordinated operation added weight to a case that would obliterate him. Worse, because it revealed depths of corruption I never imagined he was capable of. My father hadn't stumbled into crime. He hadn't been pressured into it by debt or desperation. He had chosen it. Deliberately, strategically, he had built a business for the sole purpose of laundering money, not just for low-level operators, but for organizations that stretched far beyond Chicago. His construction company, the one I grew up thinking was the honest backbone of our family, was the primary vehicle. Inflated costs on city contracts, kickbacks, shell accounts, ghost employees. All of it feeding into a laundering pipeline run by the Calabrese family, one of Oscar's competitors. Drug money flowed through those contracts like a hidden river, and my father took a cut, a big one. But he owed nearly $800,000, due in 3 months. Without the insurance payout, he couldn't pay it, and the Calabrese family wasn't known for granting extensions, or mercy. He chose this, I said to Oscar during our evening briefing, my voice heavy with a clarity I wished I didn't have. This wasn't circumstances or bad luck. He deliberately built a business designed to serve as a front for illegal money. Oscar studied me from across the conference table. The firelight behind him cast sharp shadows, softening nothing. Something that almost looked like sympathy flickered in his eyes. Does that change anything? I considered the question carefully. Reason said yes, it should make revenge easier. It should transform my father into a villain uncomplicated by nostalgia or grief. But instead, a new ache opened beneath my ribs. It makes me wonder how much of my childhood was real, I whispered. He used to help me with homework, teach me about ethics and responsibility, lecture me about making good choices. A broken laugh escaped me. Was any of that genuine? Or was it all a performance? Oscar exhaled slowly, his posture relaxing just a fraction. People are complicated, he said quietly. It's possible for someone to love their child genuinely, while also being willing to kill that child for money. He didn't soften it. He didn't make it easier to swallow. The two truths can coexist, he continued, without canceling each other out. That seems like a contradiction, I murmured. Human beings are contradictions. Oscar's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard from him before. The kind forged in fire, not theory. I found myself leaning forward, drawn in, wanting, needing, to understand this man who had become so central to my survival. We're capable of tremendous love, he continued, and tremendous cruelty, often toward the same people. His gaze sharpened on me, steady and unflinching. Your father may have loved you in his way, and he also decided his financial problems mattered more than your life. Both things are true. How do you know? I asked softly. How can you be so certain about the complexity of betrayal? Oscar didn't answer at first. A long, deep silence stretched between us. His eyes went distant, seeing something far behind the present moment. And when he finally spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw from somewhere deep inside him. My mother was killed when I was 17. He paused just long enough for my breath to catch. My father's business partner, a man who ate at our table, who bounced me on his knee as a child, who called himself family, wanted control of the organization. And my mother was in the way. The revelation slammed into me, unexpected, intimate. Oscar had given me almost nothing personal in the weeks I'd worked for him. He'd been polished steel, a man of strategy and restraint. This glimpse behind the armor felt like a gift I hadn't earned. What happened to him? I asked, barely above a whisper. The partner? Oscar turned to look at me fully. His expression was carved from ice in memory. I was young, 17, blinded by grief and rage. I wanted to kill him immediately, to avenge my mother with blood. His jaw tightened. My father stopped me. He told me that revenge without strategy is just emotion, and emotion makes you weak. So you waited, I said. I waited. Oscar's smile was lethal. Sharp, precise. The kind of smile that came with a warning label. For 3 years, I built a case against him. Financial crimes. Documentation of every betrayal. Every disloyal act. Every weakness. He leaned back slightly, his voice dropping into something darker. And when I finally moved, I didn't just kill him. I destroyed everything he had built, everything he cared about, everyone who helped him. I swallowed hard. I left him with nothing except the knowledge that a 17-year-old boy had outmaneuvered him completely. Oscar's eyes locked onto mine. Then, he said softly, almost gently, I killed him. The story should have horrified me. 3 years of calculated destruction followed by murder. That wasn't justice by any civilized definition. But in this room, in this moment, still raw from my own father's betrayal, I understood him. Some crimes demanded more than punishment. Some betrayals required annihilation. You're saying I need to be patient, I said slowly. I'm saying, Oscar replied, returning to his seat with deliberate calm, that destroying your father will take time if you want to do it properly. His focus zeroed in on me, sharp, intense, unwavering. We build the case methodically. We document every crime, every connection, every vulnerability. And when we move with overwhelming force, leaving him no escape and no recourse. My breath caught. How long? Your father has been making inquiries about expediting the insurance declaration, Oscar said. He has a tame judge who might be willing to issue an early ruling if the circumstances seem sufficiently compelling. A pause. Perhaps 6 months, perhaps less. 6 months. That was my window. The time I had to build a case comprehensive enough to destroy my father, before he collected the money that was supposed to be his reward for murdering me. Then we work fast, I said, resolve hardening like steel inside me. I'll need everything Marco can give me. Every database, every surveillance record, every piece of intelligence you have. Oscar nodded, and something shifted in his expression. A subtle change I couldn't name, but it sent heat rushing through my pulse. You'll have it. Then softer. But Claudia? It was the first time he'd used my name. The intimacy of it hit me harder than it should have. Be certain that you want this, he continued. Once we move against your father, there is no going back. No reconciliation. No forgiveness. No relationship worth salvaging. His eyes held mine, dark and steady. You'll be choosing to destroy the man who raised you, and that choice will shape who you become for the rest of your life. The warning should have stopped me. It didn't. It felt like confirmation of a decision already carved into my bones. My father made his choice when he pushed me off that bridge, I said. I'm responding in kind. Oscar's smile was sharp and dangerous and devastatingly beautiful. Then let's finish it, he murmured. Together. December surrendered to January, and I barely noticed. The world outside Oscar's compound faded to irrelevance. My universe was the flow of data across my monitors. The digital evidence forming a noose around my father's throat. I wasn't just building a case. I was building his ruin. A monstrous, meticulous map of the crimes that would bury him. In court. Or by other means if the legal system proved insufficient. Oscar had made that part clear. The days blurred. Nights blurred faster. I'd wake before dawn, torn from sleep by nightmares of drowning, and find myself at my desk before sunrise, chasing leads through financial darkness. Breakfast had become a ritual. Oscar joining me each morning, pastries and coffee between us, as we mapped the next angles of attack. And somewhere in those morning conversations, something began to shift. I started noticing things I shouldn't. The way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated, the fleeting vulnerability when he let his guard slip, the careful precision with which he monitored my comfort and safety. Subtle, constant, inescapably intimate. He made sure I ate, made sure I slept, made sure I didn't drown myself in the investigation the way I had almost drowned in the lake. One morning, long before dawn, he found me at my desk. surrounded by financial records and empty coffee cups. "Claudia," he said, voice low, "you're working too hard." He stepped closer. "You need rest. I need to finish this." I didn't look up from the screen, fingers flying as I tracked another thread in my father's money laundering network. "He's been visiting my apartment. Did Marco tell you? He sits in my living room for hours, just sitting there among my things." "I know." Oscar's hand settled on my shoulder, warm, grounding, steadying. "But destroying yourself won't destroy him. You need to be strong for what's coming." I finally looked up, meeting the dark eyes that had become disturbingly familiar. "Were you strong?" I asked. "When you were building your revenge?" "No." The word was quiet, honest in a way that felt like an exposed nerve. "I nearly destroyed myself," he admitted. "I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I became so consumed by rage that I forgot everything else. My father had to physically drag me away from my work, force me to remember that life existed beyond revenge." "And did it help? Taking breaks?" "It kept me sane enough to see my revenge through to the end." His hand shifted, moving from my shoulder to cut my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with a gentleness that stole the breath from my lungs. "And it gave me something to return to when the revenge was done," he murmured. "You'll need that, Claudia. Something to hold on to when the satisfaction fades." It should have felt inappropriate, crossing boundaries we'd maintained for weeks. Instead, it felt inevitable, like we'd been drifting toward this moment since the instant he dragged me out of the lake. "Is that what you are?" I whispered. "Something to hold on to?" Oscar's expression changed, the control cracking, revealing something raw and painfully real beneath. "I'm a man who has been falling for you since the moment I pulled you from that lake." His voice deepened, each word thick with truth. "Every day you've been in my home, every conversation, every glimpse of who you are beneath the surface. It's all been pushing me toward something I can't resist." My heartbeat stuttered, then raced. But wanting you and being good for you aren't the same thing." He drew his hand away and the loss was immediate. Sharp, physical. "My world is dangerous. My enemies will use you against me if they can." His gaze locked on mine, unflinching, devastating. "Loving you makes me weak." "Loving me," I echoed, the words tasting electric. "Yes." His voice was rough, bare of polish or power. "Loving you, but I can't act on it. Not while you're dependent on me for protection. Not while you're raw from your father's betrayal." He swallowed hard. "It wouldn't be fair, and I won't take advantage of your vulnerability." The nobility of it should have softened me. Instead, frustration simmered hot and immediate, a tension he was pretending not to feel. "What if I'm not vulnerable?" I challenged. "What if I know exactly what I want?" His jaw tightened. His breath caught. His eyes darkened in a way that sent heat curling through my stomach. "Then you can tell me again," Oscar said quietly. "When your father is destroyed, and you're free to make choices that aren't driven by trauma and revenge." Oscar stepped back, putting deliberate space between us. "Until then," he said quietly, "we work together, nothing more." I should have respected the boundary he was drawing, the line he was trying to carve between desire and discipline, between his world and mine. Instead, something fierce rose in me, defiant, unwilling to let him decide what I could or couldn't handle. But I also understood the wisdom in waiting, so I nodded, turned back to my monitors, and didn't mention it again. The investigation consumed the following weeks, a dark, intricate puzzle I was finally strong enough to solve. Piece by piece, I mapped the true scope of my father's criminal empire. It was bigger than I'd imagined, darker, more deliberate. The Calabrese family was just one of several criminal organizations, using his construction company as a laundering pipeline. He wasn't a victim of circumstance. He was a facilitator, a crucial cog in a machine that washed illegal funds into legitimacy. And he was failing, spectacularly. Debts were piling faster than he could manage them. The insurance money from my death was supposed to be his lifeline. $2 million to stabilize his accounts, pay off the Calabrese family, and keep his empire standing. But I wasn't dead. And every day I remained alive, his world became more unstable. "The Calabrese family is getting impatient," Marco reported during one of our strategy sessions. "Your father has missed 2 payment deadlines. They're starting to look at his assets, searching for leverage." Good. Oscar's satisfaction was unmistakable. "Let them apply pressure. Desperation will make him sloppy. Marco hesitated, just long enough for tension to thicken between us. There's something else. He slid a folder across the table. He's trying to expedite the insurance declaration. His lawyer filed a motion last week. They're arguing the circumstances clearly indicate death. The judge is scheduled to rule next month. My stomach twisted sharply. If the judge declared me dead, my father would collect the money. He'd pay off the Calabrese family. He'd erase the evidence of his failure. And he would walk away clean. That won't happen, Oscar said, his voice ablade. We'll ensure the judge understands that ruling in your father's favor would be inadvisable. I didn't ask how he planned to send that message. Some aspects of Oscar's world were meant to stay in shadow, and I'd learned, quickly, not to look directly into the darker corners of his influence. February arrived with a bitter cold that turned Chicago into a frozen wasteland. I barely noticed. My life had narrowed to the glowing monitors in front of me, the case that had become both my purpose and my obsession. And the case had grown monstrous. 10 years of crime layered and complex. A web of fraud, laundering, bribery, and conspiracy. Every thread I pulled revealed 3 more. Every document added weight to the force I was building. A force designed to crush Dominic Marchetti completely. And with Marco's intelligence, I'd uncovered something even more explosive. Evidence powerful enough not only to destroy my father's operation, but to bring down the entire Calabrese network. This changes things, Oscar said, studying the files I'd laid out. We were in my office late at night. The compound silent except for the low hum of the servers. If we move on your father and provide this evidence to the right people, we eliminate a major competitor. 2 birds, 1 stone, I murmured, tracing the mapped-out transactions with my fingertip. My father gets destroyed and you gain a strategic advantage. Yes, Oscar didn't pretend otherwise. But Claudia, when we move, the Calabrese family will know someone provided this intelligence. They'll come looking for the source. Let them look. A cold hardness settled in my chest, solid, immovable. I want them to find me. I want them to know Dominic Marchetti's daughter is the one who brought down their entire operation. Oscar studied me for a long, long moment. You've changed, he said finally, voice low. The woman I pulled from the lake wouldn't have said that. The woman you pulled from the lake died down there. The truth slipped out before I could soften it. I'm whoever survived in her place. And who is that? He asked. I met his gaze without flinching. Someone strong enough to do what needs to be done. Someone who understands that the world is dangerous, and that the only power that matters is the power to protect what you love. Something shifted in Oscar's expression. The careful control he'd worn for weeks cracking as heat, raw and unfiltered, broke through. And what do you love, Claudia? The question hung between us like a live wire, sparking through the air. The distance he'd insisted on maintaining was gone. Eroded by proximity, by shared purpose, by the gravity that had been pulling us together since the night he saved my life. I love the person I'm becoming, I said softly. I love the work we're doing. I love... The last word stuck in my throat. Say it. Oscar's voice was rough, almost pleading. Say it. I love you. It came out quiet, but steady, confident, undeniable. I've been falling for you since you saved me. Every conversation, every glimpse of the real you behind the reputation, every moment you let your guard down. It's all been pulling me deeper. And I know you said we should wait, that I wasn't ready, that it wouldn't be fair. I swallowed hard. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this. Oscar closed the distance between us in 3 strides. His hands framed my face with a gentleness that stole the breath from my lungs. I told myself I'd wait until you were free, he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. Until your father was destroyed. Until you could choose without trauma clouding your judgment. His breath brushed my lips. But God help me, Claudia. His voice broke just slightly. I can't stay away from you anymore. When his lips met mine, it felt like coming home after a journey I hadn't known I was taking. The kiss was everything I'd imagined, and nothing I expected. Tender and fierce at once. The release of weeks of carefully held restraint finally giving way. We broke apart, breathless. Oscar's dark eyes searched mine with an intensity that made my heart stutter. If we do this, he said, voice low, there's no going back. My world is dangerous. My enemies will use you against me if they can. Loving you makes me vulnerable in ways I've spent my life trying to avoid. Then we'll be vulnerable together, I said, and we'll be stronger for it. His smile shifted, sharp features softening into something unexpectedly beautiful. Stay with me, he whispered. Not just until your father is destroyed. Stay with me. Yes, I answered. I meant it. The operation began on a Tuesday morning in late February. Deliberately ordinary. The kind of day you don't notice until everything changes. I watched the first phase unfold from the surveillance room. Monitors lining the walls and city feeds scrolling across them like a digital map of the trap we'd set. My hand found Oscar's. Our fingers threaded together with the practiced ease of people who had learned each other in a dozen small ways these past weeks. At 9:15, federal agents hit my father's construction company with warrants, seizing records, freezing accounts. On screen, I watched Dominic Marchetti step out of his office. Confusion, alarm, panic rising like heat off asphalt. Phase 1 complete, Marco reported. His bank accounts are freezing. The Calabrese family has received our intelligence package. I watched my father's world unravel. Frantic phone calls, lawyers stepping back, partners distancing, employees fleeing. He stood there, composition dissolving into chaos, completely unaware that the architect of his ruin was the daughter he thought dead. The Calabrese family is moving, Marco said. They know he's compromised. They can't risk him being arrested and talking. Then we need to move now, I said, standing, before they silence him permanently. Oscar squeezed my hand once and let go. Are you ready? The question deserved more time than I gave it. Was I ready to face the man who had tried to kill me? Was I prepared to watch understanding dawn in his eyes? To see the exact moment he realized his dead daughter was alive, and had orchestrated every piece of his downfall? Yes, I said. I'm ready. We traveled in a convoy of black SUVs, the engines quiet and purposeful. Oscar sat beside me, his hand steady on my knee through the entire drive. He wore dark tactical clothing, nothing flashy, nothing excessive, just lethal efficiency made visible. He looked exactly like the man the city whispered about in fear. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I'm with you. You're not alone in this. And I believed him. The building was nearly empty when we arrived. Security stepped aside without a word. Some out of fear, some out of respect, some because Oscar's influence was palpable even in silence. We found my father in his office, sitting behind the desk that had once symbolized his power. Now it looked too big for him. He looked too small for it. His shoulders were rounded in defeat. The collapse of his empire clung to him like a second skin. He didn't look up when the door opened. He didn't look up when Oscar entered. But when I spoke, "Hello, Father," his head snapped up as if struck. Recognition crashed through him like a physical blow. Confusion, disbelief, a flicker, just a flicker of hope. And then horror, pure naked horror. Claudia. The word trembled out of him. But you were dead. I watched you fall. The water was, no one survives that cold, there was no way. And yet here I am. I stepped closer, letting him see me clearly, letting the truth burn into him. Alive and very, very angry. His gaze darted past me to Oscar. A shadow, a threat, a verdict standing in human form. Who is this? What's happening? Claudia, listen to me, please. I never meant... It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was desperate. The debts. You stood at that railing and watched me fall. My voice cut through his excuses like steel. You didn't call for help. You didn't try to reach me. You drove away and reported me missing the next morning. He flinched. You performed grief for the police, I continued, while planning how to spend the insurance payout on my death. His voice cracked, I made a mistake. You took out a life insurance policy when I was 16. Calm, precise, cold. $2 million. You spent years building debt you intended to erase with that money. You researched which judges would expedite a death declaration. You tracked timelines, legal loopholes, precedents. I leaned forward. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated murder. His face collapsed under the weight of the words. How do you know all this? Who told you? I'm a forensic accountant, Father. I stepped close enough to smell the stale anxiety on his breath. I followed the money. Every transaction, every shell company, every bribe, every link to the Calabrese family and their laundering operations. He recoiled as if each word were venom. I know everything, and I've shared that knowledge with people who will ensure you face consequences. I watched the realization take hold. The federal raid, the frozen accounts, his lawyer abandoning him, his employees fleeing, his partners cutting ties. All the pieces fell into place. All of them led back to me. His daughter, his victim, his executioner. You did this. Not a question. A realization. My own daughter. You tried to drown me for insurance money. My voice cracked, finally, inevitably, as emotion surged to the surface. You pushed me off a bridge and left me to die. Whatever I've done to you doesn't begin to compare. His expression shifted. Desperation. Collapsing into something darker. I should have made sure, he said quietly. The words sliced ice through my veins. I should have stayed to watch you sink. I didn't have time to react. My father lunged toward me, and Oscar moved like a shadow unchained. One moment Dominic Marchetti was upright, reaching, snarling. The next he was on the floor. Oscar's boot pressed against his throat, not crushing but controlling, pinning him with terrifying precision. That, Oscar said, voice calm, too calm, was a deplorable decision. I stared down at the man gasping beneath his heel. My father, my would-be murderer, and I felt nothing but cold, crystalline satisfaction. This, I said, stepping closer, is the life you built. His eyes searched mine, fear widening them, panic bleeding through. The Calabrese family knows everything, I continued. They know you're compromised. They know federal investigators will trace their money through your operations. Tell me, Father. I tilted my head. How do you think they handle liabilities like you? Fear replaced fury. A primal animal fear. The kind that knows exactly what fate awaits it. Please. The word was barely a breath. Claudia, please, I'm your father. You stopped being my father the moment you pushed me off that bridge. I turned away, unable and unwilling to look at him any longer. Oscar, I said. We're done here. Oscar lifted his foot with contemptuous ease and stepped back to join me. Behind us, I heard my father cough, scramble, choke on his own breath. He called my name. Ragged, desperate, breaking. I didn't look back. The Calabrese family found him 36 hours later. His body surfaced in the Chicago River, the same water that was supposed to have been my grave. The newspapers called it a mob hit. Law enforcement called it predictable. I felt nothing. Oscar held me that night, strong arms wrapped around me as if he knew I might break, or might not break enough. I hadn't pulled the trigger, hadn't wielded the knife, hadn't been the one to deliver the final blow, but I had architected the collapse. I had dismantled every support beam holding his world together. I had left him exposed and defenseless. His death wasn't my hand, but it was my design. How do you feel? Oscar asked softly. The same question he'd asked the night I first slept under his roof. Free, I said. And then quieter. Empty. Like I hollowed myself out to build this revenge, and now I have to figure out what to fill the space with. You fill it with life, Oscar murmured. With purpose, with love, with the future you choose to build. The revenge is done. Now you decide who you want to be. Who did I want to be? That question haunted me, in the days that followed, in the weeks after that, in the strange, quiet moments when the adrenaline faded and the world felt too big and too quiet and too mine. The woman I'd been before the bridge was gone, drowned in Lake Michigan, even if her body had survived. But the woman I became after, the one driven by rage, sharpened by betrayal, willing to manipulate and destroy to get what she needed, that wasn't someone I wanted to remain forever. You don't have to decide all at once, Oscar said one morning over breakfast. Our ritual, one of the few constants in the chaos of my reinvention. Identity isn't something you choose once and keep forever. You grow, you evolve, you become different versions of yourself as life changes. I studied him, needing an answer that mattered more than I wanted to admit. And what version of me do you love? His smile softened, real, warm, devastating. All of them, he said. The woman I pulled from the lake, frightened, fighting to survive. The investigator who rebuilt herself through focus and grit. The lover who chose to stay with me despite everything. And the woman you are now, someone brave enough to ask who she wants to become. His words settled inside me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Then I choose this, I said. I choose us. I choose your world. Not because I'm hiding from my past, but because I'm ready to build something worth having. Oscar reached across the table and took my hand. You'll have to get used to danger, he warned gently. My enemies will target you. You'll need training, protection. You'll have to trust my people. And sometimes you'll have to accept that safety is an illusion. I learned that the night my father pushed me off a bridge, I replied. Safety was always an illusion. The only thing that matters is choosing who you trust with your vulnerability. And you trust me, with everything. I squeezed his hand. You saved me, Oscar. You gave me the tools to get justice. You loved me when I was broken and helped me become whole again. Yes, I trust you. Completely. His dark eyes held mine with an intensity that still made my breath catch, no matter how many mornings we shared. Then let's build something together, he said softly. Something that lasts, something worthy of the second chance we've both been given. I smiled. What did you have in mind? Oscar's answering smile was sharp, beautiful, full of promise. Everything. I stood at the window of our bedroom, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan. The same water that should have been my grave now glittered like a promise. Golden rose and alive. The world felt wide again. Possible again. Oscar wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, pulling me gently against him. His hands slid to rest over the gentle swell of my belly, where our daughter grew stronger every day. You're up early, he murmured against my ear, voice rough with sleep and love. I covered his hands with mine, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my back. I wanted to see the sunrise, I whispered. It reminds me of who I was, and who I get to be now. Oscar kissed my temple. And who is that? I smiled at the horizon. A woman who lived, I said. A woman who loved. A woman who built her future from the ashes of her past. I turned in his arms, lifting his face to mine. A woman who chose her own life. Oscar's smile, slow, reverent, made my heart ache in the best way. Our daughter, he murmured, his hand brushing my belly, will never know the woman who fell into the lake. No, I agreed. She'll know the woman who climbed out of it. He kissed me then, soft, sure, full of the future. And as the sun rose over the water that once tried to claim me, I knew this was my rebirth. This was my family. This was my life. And it was mine, finally, entirely, beautifully mine. She's restless. I placed my hands over his, feeling the small, insistent movements beneath my skin, the life we'd created together. I think she'll be a morning person. Oscar laughed softly, the sound still rare enough to feel like a gift. Then she takes after her mother. 3 years. 3 years since my father's destruction. 3 years since I chose to stay in Oscar's world. Not as a shelter, not as a hostage, but as an architect of its future. The time had reshaped me in ways I couldn't have imagined that first night in his guest room. Soaked and shivering, certain I had lost everything. I hadn't lost anything. I'd been reborn. I was no longer just Oscar Grasso's partner. I was one of the minds that shaped his empire. My forensic accounting skills, once used to expose corruption, were now the backbone of our legitimate enterprises, the shield protecting us in the shadows where real power lived. The Calabresi family had been absorbed 18 months earlier, their leaders choosing integration over obliteration, wisely recognizing which way the tide was turning. My father's name lived only as a cautionary tale, a story told in low voices about a man who destroyed himself through greed, betrayal, and stupidity, whose daughter rose from his attempt to kill her and became something far stronger than he could ever have imagined. I felt no grief when I thought of him. The wound had healed cleanly, or perhaps it had simply transformed into something harder, sharper, more resilient than the original flesh. Come back to bed, Oscar murmured against my neck, his lips brushing the sensitive curve. The world can wait an hour. I turned in his arms, rose on my toes, and kissed him. Slow, deep, sure. 3 years, and the electricity between us had only grown. 3 years, and I still marveled at the truth the world would never understand. They called him a monster, but he was my salvation. Oscar Grasso was capable of tremendous violence, and tremendous love, both wielded with the same unwavering intensity. He had given me his breath when I was drowning. He had given me the tools to destroy the man who tried to murder me. And now he was giving me a future I had never dared to imagine. A family, an empire, a legacy that would outlast us both. The sun climbed over Lake Michigan. painting our bedroom in gold and rose, the same lake that had tried to claim me, now reflecting the life I'd built from its depths. Oscar led me back to bed, back to the life we'd forged, to the man who had become my anchor, to the family growing under my hands. My father had tried to drown me for insurance money. Oscar Grasso had pulled me from the water and taught me how to breathe again. Some debts could never be repaid. Some loves could never be explained. And some women, forged in betrayal, reborn in dangerous arms, find exactly where they belong. I was one of them, and as I lay in Oscar's arms, our daughter moving beneath my hands, I understood. The woman who had fallen from that bridge had indeed drowned in Lake Michigan. The woman who survived was someone else, someone stronger, someone dangerous, someone capable of building empires, and loving fiercely, and protecting what mattered with absolute ruthlessness. The woman who survived was exactly who I was meant to be.